Pete Muller, National Wild Turkey Federation. You are listening to Pro Talk Outdoors with JP and Dave.
That's what I call pro talk. When you really don't know the answer, you just make it up.
My rut is that I am in a rut.
To get the pilot of Red Arrow going. This is really a way to skip class.
I want to say, hey, those boys right there are entertainers.
There you go. That's the nicest thing anybody's ever said on this podcast.
Alex Rutledge here with American Roots Outdoors TV.
Hey, this is Lee and Tiffany Lukoski from the Crush TV.
Hi, I'm Don Higgins.
This is Jeff Lindsay.
Hey, everybody, this is Mark Drury with Drury Outdoors.
Hey, this is Craig Fitz of Trained Assassins TV. You're listening to Dave and JP on Pro Talk Outdoors, the craziest two I know.
In a rut, and basically now we've covered a little bit on just a conservation as a whole. We want to dive into a more species specific thing, and with turkey season right around the corner, for some guys only a couple weeks away, we want to spend some time and talk about wild turkey.
Yeah, no better time to jump into it than right now.
Not the whiskey, by the way. But one thing about it is, Dave, I mean, you started hunting turkey, what, 20 years ago, 25 years ago? And things have changed drastically in that time, right?
25 years. Well, almost 25 years. Yeah, and you know, here we are in southern Indiana, and specifically the counties that I was hunting in. I can remember back to when I found, or actually heard my first turkey gobble in the woods.
And what did that feel like?
I was absolutely amazed and shocked.
Did you have the same look on your face that I had on mine?
Well, I tell you what. Here's the way. Let me lay that story out, because I think that actually that's pretty relevant to this topic in this this podcast here. But back whenever I was in high school, getting ready. Actually, it was my freshman.
Oh, so this was more like 80 years ago.
Funny. It was actually my freshman year in college in the springtime, so it would have been 95. There weren't many turkeys around in our area, especially the areas that I hunted. And a teammate of mine in college, played college baseball. He has a farm that was, had some turkeys on it, and it was actually in a couple counties over from where we're at. And he had offered him and his dad to take me out turkey hunting, and I can't remember the family commitment that I had, but I couldn't go that morning with him due to what time I had to be back. So I just went on one of the pieces of property that I had, and I'd never laid eyes on a turkey in the woods at that time, but I thought, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to listen, I'm going to turkey hunt and see what happens. And to my surprise, there was a bird back there gobbling. And I actually called him in. And I don't think I've shared this story with you, JP.
I don't think so.
Called this bird in, and I passed him up. I didn't shoot him.
Why?
Because it was the first turkey that I'd ever seen on that piece of property, and I felt like if I was to shoot that turkey, there may not be another one come back for a while, so I let him go.
Well, at that time, was there not a one-bird limit?
There was a one-bird limit.
So you were afraid you were going to take the only bird on the property, and anybody else that hunted it was...
No. It wasn't even... It was more of a longevity thing, almost a conservation thing where,
Gotcha.
I didn't know how well the turkeys were going to be established in the area. I didn't want to take the very first turkey I ever seen and then not have turkeys, populate on the property.
You made a good conservation step your very first time out there.
Yeah, I was actually... I was really happy with the decision that I made. I had to that point, it was like, to me, I felt like the hunt of a lifetime because I'd never been that close to a wild turkey. And this bird come in, hindsight, this bird was pretty stupid. I mean, I barely could call, and I called this bird right in, and he was spitting and drumming and strutting and gobbling, and it just came right in. And I had him at 20 yards, just kind of looking around for a hen, and
I guess you were on the ground.
I was sitting on the ground, and I just could not pull the trigger. I just sat there and appreciated him and watched him, and eventually he just kind of got tired of looking around for a hen that wasn't there and just went on off. But
that's an impressive story. I would have to think that conservation as a whole has to have 1,000,001 instances of somebody making that same conscious decision, especially when a species is essentially in its infancy. in terms of growth. And obviously species of all kinds go through, lulls and waves in terms of their population, and it's always a big factor when you take a federation or an organization or something that is behind that species pushing for proper laws, proper management, working at the state level as well to ensure those practices are best made. And the guy we're going to have on today, Pete Muller of the National Wild Turkey Federation, he's going to be a good guest, and he's going to be able to shed some light on how wild turkey kind of started as a love for hunters in the United States and how it's expanded over the years and maybe where it's headed in the future. Obviously, a lot of guys love to talk about the Grand Slam now, and you're going to be lucky enough to head to Nebraska here in just a few weeks.
Yeah, going out there, Eric and I are going out to chase some Merriams, and that's that's kind of a bucket list hunt there, and something that we really have I've always wanted to do, get out there, and I guess the opportunity never really afforded itself to me, and this year it's just kind of working out well, so we're going to go out there and chase them for a week, the first week of archery season. It's archery only, so we're going to go out there and take the Matthews and try to put it to good use and try to come back with a few Merriams.
Could be some good stories to go along with that as well. And we're going to go ahead and kick it off to break and welcome Pete Muller here in just a moment. Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Pro Talk Outdoors.
Before we get Pete on the line, a quick word from Dr. Aaron Gaines of Real World Wildlife Products discussing some of the positive effects of Expect Healthy Deer technology.
Well, I would say in the case of Expect Healthy Deer technology, in terms of the benefits, it's certainly more than just a way to help combat against EHD. In terms of some of the other benefits, like I discussed earlier, it enhances the immune system, so keeping your deer herd healthy from disease and other health risk, improving digestion. So you think about growing that antler. If we can improve digestion, we're going to have better performance in terms of antler growth and reproduction in the doe. We talk about antler growth. We've got ingredients in that technology that help support growth of the antler in terms of nutrient delivery to growing antlers. We talked about the fact that it helps reduce biting insects in the case of the midgefly, but even other insects that are a nuisance to the deer in the wild or even in captive deer that causes discomfort and makes that deer less productive. It mitigates heat stress. So if we can mitigate some of that heat stress, that's pretty costly to the animal energetically. So if we can keep that animal more comfortable, they're going to be more productive. And then we've got some appetite stimulants in that product. So really trying to drive consumption of the Expect Healthy Deer technology. And frankly, for, the deer hunter, we want to make sure they keep coming back. And that's one of the things we want to do is we want to grow and hold deer on your property with our products.
Thanks, Aaron. And for a complete list of the products including the Expect Healthy Deer technology, you can go to Real World Wildlife Products website at www.realworldwildlifeproducts.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Pro Talk Outdoors, and as I mentioned in the first segment, we're going to be talking about wild turkey, and not so much just the hunting aspect. We've covered that before, and we will again in the future, but we wanted to spend an episode talking about just the conservation and management of the species and the subspecies of wild turkey, and we've been fortunate enough to get linked up with Pete Muller of the NWTF. Pete, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Not a problem, man. Thank you guys for having me. Anytime I get to talk turkey, it makes me happy.
Well, hey, getting to do it for a living probably isn't too bad a gig, so congratulations on that.
Anytime that you can, it doesn't seem like work and you can make it through a full day, that is a blessing.
Well, man, that is volumes right there. That speaks volumes. And I have to think, to be in a conservation organization like you are, it takes a passion like that. And some of the things that we had mentioned in our first segment here was just wanting to ask where turkey started in America and how they got to where they are right now. Because honestly, it's almost a darling of hunters all across the U.S., it seems like. Even guys from out west wanting to go east to chase either Rios or Merriams. How long have you been in the organization, I guess, should be my first question.
Gotcha. So I've been involved with the National Wild Turkey Federation now for 4 years. Oversee public relations and then also digital media, things like that. But I've gotten to learn a whole lot myself about what actually goes on in the organization, being involved at such an important level. But you talk to folks and you try to get a picture of where everything started. You know, you're right that turkeys are kind of that. It's one of those hallmark stories of conservation successes where birds hit an all-time low of, the number that we use is about 200,000 birds in the early 1900s. And a lot of efforts were taken all along the way to try to build everything back up. And, it truly is a remarkable story that does fall into the hands of, the people being responsible for it is hunters, state agencies, everybody that's involved. Hunters are conservationists in our mind, and then the NWTF played a great big role starting in the early 70s when they were formed in 1973.
Pete, let me ask you this question. I talked a little bit in the opening segment about how my first experience turkey hunting was back in the mid 90s, and the area that I was hunting in, we had no turkeys to speak of, but right before that, I guess it was early 90s, there was some effort by the National Wild Turkey Federation to relocate birds from not only from a few counties over, but also some birds from Missouri were brought into southern Indiana and released. And I know that was complete effort based on the part of the National Wild Turkey Federation working alongside with the DNR. How much of that actually happens today? Is there any kind of relocation efforts to get birds in areas where maybe they're not established right now?
Yeah, great question. So, interesting point, just you saying that birds came from Missouri. I mean, Missouri is almost one of those stocking states that a lot of the reintroduction efforts that help get birds to where they are now, which, peaked at about almost 7 million, but now they sit about, let's say, like 6.25 million across the country. A lot of those efforts did come from Missouri, but there's not nearly as much of that going on today. A lot of what we're doing today is more focused on habitat restoration efforts. But, one of the key areas that I always think of as far as where restoration efforts and also restocking efforts are still going on today is in East Texas. And, Texas is known for having a huge, just robust population of Rios that numbers almost about 500,000 birds across the state. So impressive things that they're doing there. But the eastern population that they have just there in that part of East Texas, and it's because the terrain more mimics the style of what you have there in your other coastal, or I guess Gulf states of Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi. There's just been a lot of problem in getting the eastern birds to take a foothold there. And so I know at least over the past 3 to 4 years, we've really spent some time on restocking efforts. Birds have come from West Virginia, Missouri. I want to say Indiana, Illinois were part of those as well. But, they're releasing about 200 birds every January, February to try to get those birds to take hold. One of the other ones that I remember from, I guess it was about 2 years ago, maybe now, was Nebraska. There was some trap and transfer of about 200 birds, and they were released up into the Missouri breaks in Montana. I know that a lot more of what you're seeing, instead of just trap and transfer from state to state, what you're seeing is you're taking birds that are encroaching in upon, inhabited areas, and they're moving them back out into the wild, trying to build up populations in other areas, but also remove them from that interaction that they'll get with being around larger communities, things like that.
Now, I want to take a step back. You had mentioned that some Easterns were having trouble getting acclimated to certain parts of the country. Obviously, folks are at least vaguely familiar with the 4 subspecies of turkey, and then obviously you got some hybrids, I think, tossed in there where they intermingle. But what is the main difference between the 4 types of birds, and what would cause one to struggle in one area versus thrive in another?
That's a little bit more of a tricky question, and not being a biologist, I'm probably not the best person to answer that. The easiest way that I distinguish between them is the color of your plumage on your tail fans and things like that. But you do have some differences, I think, just biologically in the way that the birds and the types of conditions the birds are used to. Your Rios are more known for that Great Plains corridor. Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. Obviously, your Miriams, they seem to be more acclimated to your more snowy conditions and your higher altitudes. Being in Colorado, Wyoming, the Black Hills there in South Dakota, them also being in Montana. Out west, you get a mix of Rios in California. You also have some subspecies of Miriams as well. But it's, I think what they have been trying to do is find, obviously, because Easterns spread all the way from the northern parts of Florida all the way up to Maine, you do have some serious diversity in just the eastern subspecies, and it's finding the ones that can be well acclimated to that part of Texas. And it could be that, the current habitat just isn't perfect there for them to take a foothold. Obviously, you need early growth or young growth in your forests to be able to support brood and nesting habitats. And so there's just a lot of work, collaborative efforts going on between different state agencies, but also Texas Parks and Wildlife just doing a tremendous job down there to really try to figure out what's going to work best for those birds down there. And this was kind of a neat thing that I saw, but because people of Texas are invested in the future of the eastern wild turkey there's even places where they're willing to give up or have public land closed to the hunting of eastern turkeys because they want to make sure that those birds get a fair shot at being established. So, it's kind of what you saw back in the big trap and transfer days where, your folks in Missouri or whatever state that it might be that was sending birds elsewhere across the country, people were fine with letting their birds go from their state because they knew of the greater good that could come from the overall efforts, which is just that shows the true colors of a hunter, which is it's just not about going out and shooting something. It's about doing what's best for wildlife.
Without a doubt, Pete, the conservation efforts of the National Wild Turkey Federation has been one of the leaders in really in our hunting heritage in the country over the last since the 70s or 60s, whenever the National Wild Turkey Federation got established. But you mentioned Texas and that restocking effort there for Easterns, and you mentioned Missouri being a state that usually stocks other states. What are some other areas that you know of maybe in the country where maybe there's some issues right now with low turkey populations, and then maybe also speak to what are some areas in the country where there's an overabundance of turkeys?
So I think one of the biggest things to always remember, in talking about potential issues is, there are certain regions of the country and that may have similarities in issues that are plaguing wild turkeys, white-tailed deer, quail, whatever it might be. But what you're looking at is, when the NWTF got started in '73, you were at about 1.3 million birds. At the end of our big trap and transfer efforts, we were closing in on 7 million, and things have kind of fallen back from that. Some of the biggest, there's a lot of thoughts out there, but some of the thoughts are also that the habitat has fallen back to sustaining the amount of birds that it should. There became an overabundance, and it actually grew to more than what the habitat could sustain, and things have kind of fallen back. But the NWTF, we are a leader in working with all the state agencies. We actually, since I want to say it's the early 70s, have had our technical committee, which is made up of state wildlife agency members from all across the country, and it's to try to help bring together an educated group that tries to help share the knowledge about what's going on. And one thing that we've done beyond that is to develop our own America's Big Six of wildlife conservation. I kind of alluded to this a little bit by just talking about different areas of concern and how they're shared across the country. So up north, things that you might have, is old growth in forest. There's not nearly as much, forest harvest going on as there is, let's say, in the south. Down here, one of your main things is pine plantations and, being able to deal with that. Pretty much everywhere you look, you have to deal with loss of habitat due to just urban sprawl, things like that. Out west, you deal with invasive species, you deal with things, in all of your water corridors. Obviously, the things that turkeys need, food, water, and roost. And then, for reproduction, they need that early successional habitat, or that new growth, to be able to sustain that nest and brood habitat. So what we've tried to do is lump areas of the country together that share similarities in their needs, to where we can funnel all of our dollars to the most imperiled habitats, things that are of the highest need. Obviously, one of those that I can think of right now is, oak savannas in Kentucky. It's one of the most imperiled habitats, or I think it's Kentucky and Tennessee, but it's one of the most imperiled habitats in the country. So, we're making sure that all the people in that region know that it's a shared problem, and we're going to do the best thing that we can to tackle their issues in their area, and we can funnel and collectively put dollars towards those projects. So, but it overall, as a whole, turkey populations are still pretty robust. There are hunting seasons in 49 states. That does include Hawaii. And you're going to deal with some ebbs and flows, but it's something where we continue to monitor things and continue to work with state agencies for the betterment of the species.
Let me ask you this question, Pete. Now, you mentioned that some of the old growth type in the forests, I guess, and I guess, would it be like needing to harvest timber maybe in more in the northern states or the Midwest, like the South does, to kind of give that regrowth or that regeneration to help turkeys out? Or would it be like some burning? What kind of habitat improvement can somebody do if they own property or manage property in the Midwest?
I think it has a lot to do with, a multitude of things. Obviously, one of the biggest things that folks do down here is prescribe burning, and that helps burn off some of the understory, helps allow for new growth. But it does require, it does require a mixture of a lot of different practices. But I think the biggest thing is beyond just what number of practices do you do. It's just a shift in culture from, wide open forest, big, tall, standing trees, and what's the picturesque forest in somebody's mind, to what's a type of forest that can best hold wildlife, and realizing that often those two pictures are not the same. And you do need a cyclical growth in your forest. It needs to, start with new growth to get up to mature, and it needs to be able to then start over for the process to be able to be able to continually provide good habitat to a multitude of species.
Well, that makes perfect sense to me, that things need to go in a cycle to be efficient and to promote all that, the proper growth and sustainability of the species. And you had mentioned that things had hit like a boon, and now they're getting a little bit more down into where they need to be. So I guess that's a perfect time for me to ask you, what's next? I know obviously you're talking a little bit about habitat management and improvement, but what's on like the 10-year horizon for the NWTF?
So speaking of 10 years, we are about halfway through our 10-year Save the Habitat, Save the Hunt initiative. And obviously it took a shift in cultural, beliefs in the organization, where it was originally we're here to bring back the wild turkey. And now that the wild turkey's back, everybody says, well, what do we do now? We're now focused on habitat, and also focused on the people that are going to help provide conservation funding for the future, which is hunters. So we know that those two are tied together so fundamentally. Every license you purchase, every firearm, every box of ammunition with the excise taxes on there, that it is important to continue the numbers of hunting, or continue to recruit the next generation of hunters. So with our Save the Habitat, Save the Hunt initiative, it was started 5 years ago. Our goals were to conserve or enhance 4 million acres of habitat, recruit, retain, or reactivate, recruit 1.5 million hunters, and then also open access to an additional 500,000 acres of hunting. And already 5 years in, we are just a little bit more than 2.2 million into that goal of 4 million acres conserved. We are at nearly 1 million hunters recruited. And then we are also at about 440,000 acres of new hunting access opened. So
that's phenomenal.
Again, at the 5-year point, that's where we stand. We will probably hit the access goal this year of 500,000 acres. But we know that without the next generation of hunters, you get that loss of conservation funding. And then it's also making sure that generation and the generation after that continues to be able to have places to go to pursue their outdoor sports. So it's a lot. We know that we can't do it to get all by ourselves. We're continuing to partner with state agencies, partnering with industry, industry heavy hitters, and everybody's going to have to come together for this goal of making sure that we can continue these outdoor pursuits for generations to come.
It's one thing to talk the talk, but you're really walking the walk when you have the numbers laid out and you can rattle those off, bang, bang, bang. And to me, it's so much easier for folks to get behind a cause, get behind a purpose, when they see that some of the efforts and the direction that have already been laid out is really working. And what you just laid out on those 3 or 4 bullet points shows that all of your efforts are absolutely working 5 years in already, making some serious headway. So props to you guys, and I love it. I think it's an incredibly awesome cause. With the future,
and I'd say I'd be completely leaving out important parties in this if I didn't say, headquarters can't do this all by themselves. The members that we have, the dedicated volunteers that are out actually boots on the ground, our partners, the state agencies, everybody that's out actually in the field helping to make these things happen, those are the people that deserve just as much thanks. They are a huge part of everything that happens. It's a huge collective effort, and we hope that we can continue to grow, continue to do great things, and we hope that people will jump on board with what we're doing because they see a model that is working.
Well, in the interest of a joint venture like that and a collective effort, what is the number one thing that a current hunter can do now to be sure that they're doing their part, not only now but 10, 20 years from now when they're trying to introduce other folks into the fold? I mean, what are the steps they can take now to ensure that process is smooth, efficient, and works?
Goodness gracious, that's a question that might take a segment all unto itself. I think one of the biggest things that everybody out there can do as a hunter, and this is probably one of the easier things to do, is remember that in this day and age that everybody sees the way that you portray yourself. So it's important that as hunters that we show the full cycle of everything. We show, if we're going to show the harvest, show the fruits of the harvest, and show the meals that are shared, show the fellowship in the field, and show that bring that full picture into what we're doing as hunters. And I'd say do what you can to share it with others. Obviously, the biggest thing, one of the biggest things that you can do to create a hunter is ask somebody to go with you. Help drive that fire to get it to where they want to learn more about it and do it on their own. And it's not just going to happen in a single step. You can't take somebody hunting with you one time and then expect them to go out on their own and go hunt a turkey, for instance. It might take multiple trips and multiple times going with you afield before they're even ready to get behind a firearm and take their own turkey. It's going to take more than that before they're ready to go out on their own. It is a long process that's not just a one instance. And so, but I think it's, that first step is, for all those family and friends that you have that might not be hunters, it's, continue to portray yourself in a way to where they see the true picture of hunting and what it really is. So,
and turkey hunting is such a sport that it lends itself so well to involving new hunters, whether they're kids or whether they're somebody that is older, just hasn't been around the hunting environment. It's so exciting when you hear those turkeys gobble, and those birds are so beautiful when they come in and they're strutting and carrying on, spitting, drumming. It's and if you screw up, and if you spook a turkey, not that big a deal. It's not like you're screwing up a mature buck and you'll never get an opportunity at that deer again. Just move on and work some other turkeys. So it's a great sport to get kids or new hunters involved in.
Absolutely. I tell you, it took one gobble for me to be hooked, and I knew I had to figure out how to do this. And I'm still learning. It's a never-ending process, but I am hooked. No pun intended.
Yeah, well, Pete, that's the thing. When it comes to turkey hunting, I think the first time that somebody goes out there and they set up and they hear that bird gobble and it comes in, you can literally feel that in your chest. It really reverberates in your chest whenever that bird's close and it's gobbling, and it'll make the hair stand up on your arms and the back of your neck, and it definitely will get somebody involved. I think you create a hunter for life whenever you get them that kind of exposure.
Absolutely.
Well, Pete, before we let you go, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you the best places for everybody to keep up with what the NWTF is getting into and how they can best stay involved.
Absolutely. So obviously there's our website, nwtf.org, but also make sure that you follow us on social media channels. We are on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. We try to keep things engaging, but it's something where visit the website. You can also learn a whole lot. Our spring turkey guide just came out. Not only does it give you regulations for the states on open and close dates and some of your bag limits, but one thing new that we did this year, again, trying to help new people get into the woods, is we reached out to all of our field staff and said, hey, what's the public land where people should go hunt to get a good chance at doing, having a successful hunt? And because they're on the ground doing good work, they provided a lot of good places for people to go. Public land, again, you might end up seeing some other folks out there, but it gives you a start if you've never been before.
Pete, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this question, because this is something that people they're disgruntled a little bit about in our state of Indiana. The season seems to always open up late. I mean, it's like I think the last Wednesday of the month of April is when the season comes in, and I know there are other states that do that as well. What kind of feedback does the NWTF, if any, give to state DNRs to, I guess, kind of give them suggestions on when their season should open up? I mean, a lot of people feel like that, especially here in Indiana, that our season comes in maybe 3 weeks too late.
On something like that, I'm not sure if we do anything at all. The state agencies, while we work with the state agencies on habitat projects and things like that, we know that management of their species lies to the state. If there's things that are learned through the technical committee, we'll make sure that they get shared amongst all the states. But, again, it's something that, we're not trying to take anything away from the state agencies, because we know that, they have a big job, and they have a lot of qualified people that are out there trying to get the job done. So, it's something that I know it's got to be tough, no matter which state agency's out there, but they're all doing a pretty good job on doing the best that they can to manage the species for their publics.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that, especially I can speak very well for this Indiana DNR, and I know they get sometimes guys question the season dates or the bag limits when it comes to deer or whatever it may be. But, I know that speaking of where we're at now versus where we were at 20 years ago, we're much better off with the deer herd. We're much better off with the turkey population. Everything is looking really good, and I know those folks work hard to get it to the point where it's at now.
Absolutely. It must be doing something right.
Yep.
Well, so are you guys, Pete, and we want to thank you for coming on the show. Hang with us so we can thank you in the break. You're listening to Pro Talk Outdoors. All right, everybody, just about to wrap up this episode. Thanks again to Pete for coming on and talking a little bit about wild turkey, where they've been, where they're going, and, everything you can do along the way to improve that process, have good management, and take good care of your farm.
The history of the National Wild Turkey Federation is really, it's pretty amazing when you look back. I mean, you talk about Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and what they're doing, QDMA for deer, Whitetails Unlimited, those kind of things. But National Wild Turkey Federation, along with Ducks Unlimited, a lot of those different groups, they really have been instrumental in helping that species expand and in giving more opportunities to more outdoorsmen across areas in the country that maybe otherwise wouldn't have had that opportunity.
And ultimately, that they want to see the species grow and stay in a good population. It's not just about more numbers; it's about a healthy ratio of number in each given state and in the area, and giving everybody a good opportunity to experience the outdoors and put some meat on the table, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look back. I know I talked about that story in the opening about whenever I was a younger man, just a freshman in college, and my first experience in the turkey woods. And I remember back then at that time, the National Wild Turkey Federation was responsible for transplanting birds from a couple counties over, or even Missouri, the state of Missouri. Some birds came from there and was transplanted to our area and released. And, those things could not have been done if it weren't for people supporting the National Wild Turkey Federation and the money that was provided there through memberships, allowing that transplantation to take place. And really, it's established a very healthy population of birds in our area.
And we're looking forward to getting after them here in a few weeks. Season's a little bit way away for Indiana, but Kentucky, not all that far. Great quick recovery on that ring right there.
That was pretty good. I shut it down quick.
Man, that was pretty fast. But if you're enjoying these conservation-centric episodes, I hope you are. We're going to do a handful more of those throughout the year, and hopefully you had mentioned one that I'm really excited about as well, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. It's a species I'm enamored with and just get more so by the day. So hopefully we can get somebody on the show from them as well, and we're going to scatter some other things in as well throughout 2018. We hope you're enjoying the show, and until next time, hook 'em or hunt 'em. Pro Talk Outdoors.
Later, guys.